Hey, welcome. This is going to be a list of my top 10 Xbox 360 games. The Xbox 360 was a fantastic system with a ton of good titles. Because the 360 has a massive library of games, any top 10 list is going to leave off some great ones. I know a lot of lists have the Halo games, Skyrim, the Mass Effect trilogy, GTA 5, Red Dead Redemption, and Bioshock on them. This list doesn't include any of those games. But I know there are plenty of great lists on YouTube with these heavy hitters made by great YouTubers, so check them out. I'm also going to focus on single-player, story-focused games here. So with that said, here are my top 10 Xbox 360 games. At number 10, I have Tomb Raider. I'm talking about the 2013 game here. This is a very cinematic game, and because of that, it does abuse the QuickTime events. But they aren't very hard and are often quite forgiving, with a few exceptions. For example, there was one with a villain who grabs you, and there's a QuickTime event to escape where I was starting to get frustrated. But there's a great game under the cinematic stuff. The mechanics of combat and stealth are very fun. It's also a fun and engaging story. It's like a B-movie in the Indiana Jones style, as you'd probably expect. There isn't a whole lot of depth to the tale being told here in Tomb Raider, but it plays great and it's a really good time. At number 9, I have Dishonored. In this one, you play the role of Corvo, a bodyguard to the Empress in the game. He's wrongly accused of her assassination and he's imprisoned. The game starts with you breaking free of prison, which is pretty cool. All this takes place during a plague outbreak. The game's a lot trippier than it presents itself at the beginning. There's also a sense of freedom of playstyle in the plague-ridden steampunk world that's kind of fantastic. It'll take a bit to learn what you're doing in this game if you haven't played any games from Arcane Studios before, but it eventually dawns on you that there's no right way to play this game, and there are many, many ways to get from A to B. The story is really good at times, and also lags at times. Same with the characters in the game. The ability tree is really complex and interesting. You can learn cool abilities like possessing a rat or slowing time. Dishonored is a frustrating and clever game. It's an annoying and brilliant game. It's a lot of things. The atmosphere is somber and it's deep in lore. In that vein, there's a ridiculous amount of lore in the text in this game, on top of the audio stuff. Just a lot of text to read, if you want to. A lot of the game is basically stealth, disabling or assassinating patrols and other villains. This is a really fun game to get good at. At number 8, I have Dante's Inferno. This was an expensive game to make for EA, and is often referred to as a commercial failure. It really should have been more successful than it was. It really deserved it. Make no mistake, a lot of detail went into crafting this game. The visuals are so impressive. It might not follow the book exactly, or at all, or I don't know, but that's because it's just trying to be like a video game inspired by the book. And I think that's okay. The main character is a bit clueless, but he's likable. A fun little detail to the game is that you're given the power to punish or absolve souls based on the person's sins. You meet sinners in hell and you learn their sins and get to decide how to judge them. If you choose to absolve, you get to play a little mini game that reminds me of rhythm games, and it's a cool little detail. In the mini game, you're absolving sins with timed button presses. Whether you punish or absolve, you get points to use in your skill tree. There's a nuanced system of combat here, with fighting abilities, holy abilities, and magic. I've heard the gameplay described as God of War style, and I think that's fair. The history behind this one is apparently EA had unreasonable sales expectations, and since the game didn't meet them, Dante's Inferno 2 didn't happen, which is a shame because this was a really impressive game, and a sequel would have been awesome. Would it have been more hell, or Dante's Purgatory, or something else? We'll never know. At 7, it's Doom 3 BFG. Don't let any voice on the internet tell you otherwise. This is a fantastic id Software game and a fantastic John Carmack game. I haven't played Rage, but Doom 3 is a fun capstone to John Carmack's game-making career before he went on to VR and other things. Maybe he'll swing back around and make some more games someday, but he hasn't yet at the making of this video. I love the original Doom games. id Software was special in that it was able to create so many games that are great, one after another, and this is definitely one of them. This isn't a perfect game, but it's a fantastic envisioning of Doom as a horror game, and it's very atmospheric. And the flashlight being readily available for use does not spoil the game. Don't let any purists convince you of that. It's a great game either way. Doom 3 can be a little frustrating at some points depending on the difficulty you set, but you're unlikely to find it unfair on Marine. I would recommend this difficulty to start. The game does drag a bit once you get to the expansion. I beat Resurrection of Evil because it felt like a natural continuation, and it's really good. But I was all doomed out by the time I got to the Lost Mission. Overall, it's a great game. At number 6, I have Silent Hill Downpour. This is actually a great game. But before recommending it, I should mention that it makes you kill someone in a way that is rather uncomfortable and violent in the intro to the game, which feels cruel to do as a player. But this cruel moment does feed into the story, and if you don't get put off by it, it's well worth continuing on with the game. But be warned. Overall, this is a really big and interesting game with some awesome side quests to discover. As with most Silent Hill games, there is a lot more going on here than is initially apparent. I think it's worth it to dig your feet in the mud with this one and read all the little bits of story information scattered throughout the game. If you've played the original Silent Hill games, it's pretty clear this game doesn't have the exact same tone. But it's a compelling story and it has some trippy fun gameplay. If you don't play this one, you'll miss out on a lot of really amazing moments. Some people online say it's a broken game, and while there is some screen tearing, I had no problems that interfered with my experience. I've also seen some people say it lacks diversity in enemy monsters. This is a fair criticism, but it didn't bother me. I like how this is a Silent Hill game, and that's what caught my attention initially, but honestly, I think it would have been better appreciated if it wasn't a Silent Hill game. Be warned, there are multiple endings here, 6 in total, and they all conclude the story in very different ways. At number 5, I have the Orange Box, or more specifically, Portal. There are a lot of gaming hours on this one disc, but I'm going to focus on Portal, which in my opinion is the star here. Portal is a masterpiece. It's just the perfect puzzle game with a brilliant story and a truly great antagonist. It's also weirdly funny and actually quite touching. There are some little surprises hidden throughout the game. One partially hidden room in particular adds a lot of flavor to the story. There are a lot of people who prefer Portal 2 to Portal 1, which is also on the 360. I didn't care for the humor in Portal 2. It's a very different tone. Much more goofy British existential humor and slapstick humor. Very Stephen Merchant style comedy. Portal is one of the greatest puzzle games I've ever played, but the story is what really takes it to the next level. The humor is kind of dark and evil, which I guess is the way I like it. Lines are said with enough dry irreverence to drone out the fact that there are many bad jokes in this game. It all builds to the ridiculous crescendo at the end and all makes sense by then. In addition to Portal, this disc includes Half-Life 2, 2 expansions to Half-Life 2, and Team Fortress 2. This is why the disc is often referred to as the best collection in gaming. Number 4, it's Dark Souls. I have the most to say about this one. There's really no avoiding the word masterpiece when describing this ridiculously influential swords and sorcery game. I'm not an expert on Soulsborne games, or even a fanatic about these games. I have yet to play Elden Ring, so that's the perspective I'm giving on this one. Returning to capture footage after a long time away from Dark Souls, I came to remember just how unintuitive the controls can be at first, until you master them. I struggle with them a bit, but it started to come back to me. There's so much hidden beneath the surface here. The music and art are very specific in their mood, mournful, creepy, and beautiful. It's a brilliant atmosphere. In terms of difficulty, I think going in knowing this is going to be a brutally hard game actually makes it better. It makes you more patient with the difficulty. Like Dishonored, there's no right way to play Dark Souls, and the variability in ways you can approach it is a big part of its brilliance. Dark Souls is known for the freedom to play the game through with any style and any weapon, and the experience being equally valid. There's a lot under the hood here, but after defeating Ornstein and Smo, the game doesn't feel like it gives you the same incentive to continue, in my opinion. But up until then, few games match up to Dark Souls. This is actually one of the creepier games on this list due to some terrifying bosses that tap into deep primal instinctual fears. Though I wouldn't say it's a horror game, simply dark fantasy. It's pretty much an open world, but crushing difficulty is the barrier to progression here, into areas you're not ready for yet. I have mixed feelings about Dark Souls. I played it for the first time during the pandemic, which is later than some people who played it in the era of the Xbox 360. And its mournful tone and open world with just hints of stories and interactions actually makes it feel kind of lonely. It would have been different, I'm sure, if I'd been involved in the craziness of multiplayer with people joining your world and you joining other worlds, or if I'd streamed it. I played it as a single-player game. It's beautiful, but there's a pervasive sadness and bleakness throughout, punctuated with some absurdist humor every now and again. I'm looking at you, Crow's Nest. There are some awful and painful parts involving the difficulty as well. For example, the basilisks, or farming humanity. But what I'll remember most about Dark Souls is overcoming insurmountable odds. Killing the stray demon as a sorcerer, and having to suddenly perfect the melee part of the game, while being underpowered after using magic most of the game. It took countless tries. Finding a way to defeat Ornstein and Smo, or the godforsaken archers of Anor Londo. Conquering Blighttown, or just finally getting the hang of the game enough to make it through the Undead Burg. Countless cool memories like these are what makes this game so awesome. If you haven't played this game before, it's almost a necessity at some point to use a walkthrough. Some things are just too obtuse to figure out without it. I suggest watching videos by Fighting Cowboy. He has a great YouTube channel with detailed walkthroughs. If you put down Souls-like games for a while, your skills quickly deteriorate. It's very skill-based. In the end, I didn't beat Dark Souls. I made it past the catacombs in Anor Londo and let go of the game once I got to New Londo Ruins. It just lost its magic and luster for me by then. I spent a lot of hours with it, though. And I might come back to it someday. At number 3, I have Vin Diesel. No. The Chronicles of Riddick, Escape from Butcher Bay, and Assault on Dark Athena. This is the ultimate hidden gem in the Xbox 360 library. 2 amazing games on this disc. Great story and great gameplay. It's a stealth game with a fantastic story. Escape from Butcher Bay is a prison escape story, and Dark Athena is a story about a mercenary vessel. The voice acting is really good, with a stellar cast. It includes Vin Diesel as Riddick, Cole Hauser as Johns, which are both from the movies, Exhibit as Abbott, Ron Perlman as Jagger Valence, and Michael Rooker as Centurion Jack, and others. The whole cast is great. Vin Diesel is very invested in his performance here. You can tell he loves video games and loves this whole franchise. There's just so much fun game here to play, and it's hard to put down when you start. The original Escape from Butcher Bay is from 2004 and was on the original Xbox, and Assault on Dark Athena is from 2009. I may be biased because I love the Riddick movies, even with Vin Diesel, who's kind of a cheeseball at times in real life. I'm not a fan of Fast and Furious, but I do like The Last Witch Hunter. I think he's actually a very skilled and committed actor when given the right role. His skills can shine through. On that note, if you're interested, look up Vin Diesel's short film about auditioning. It's a look at the kind of work that goes into getting an acting role, and it's pretty ridiculous. At number 2, I have Spec Ops The Line. The gameplay is really fun despite what others say. It's a basic cover shooter, for sure, in the style of Gears of War, which are also fun games, but the story elements and environment elevate the gameplay. To be honest, the less you know going in, the better. It will have more of an impact that way. I'm just jealous of anyone who played this game knowing nothing when it was released. Part of its beauty was something I likely missed out on, and probably many people did, which is starting the game thinking it's just a traditional shooter. Things are not what they seem. It's best to go in as blind as you can. I know people say this about a lot of games and movies, but man, is it true here. I didn't go in blind, and I wish I did. I had watched some think pieces on the story when I was deciding whether or not to get it. It wasn't the best idea. What I will say is that it's inspired by Apocalypse Now and Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. Just like these stories, it explores trauma and moral ambiguity. It also reminds me of another book and a movie based on it, but I'm not going to name that one just in case someone hasn't played it, as not to give away some important story beats. The soundtrack, voice acting, and characters are amazing. Nolan North, who plays Nathan Drake in the Uncharted games, is the voice of the main character, Captain Martin Walker. Fantastic game. And at number 1 I have Dead Space. This is one of those games where all the right people were working on it at the right time, with the right idea. It takes a big team of people to work on a game like this, and sometimes you catch lightning in a bottle. That's why so often it's hard to repeat the success of a great game. Only a few can do it, like id Software or Miyamoto and Nintendo. Dead Space is clearly influenced by the movies John Carpenter's The Thing and Alien. This is plain to see. I think this is an awesome thing, as these are two of my favorite films. Maybe that makes me biased as a judge on this game, but I'm cool with that. I'm also a sucker for anything with zombies. And I think a lot of people would agree this game is fantastic wherever they'd put it on their list. Probably one of my top 3 games of all time. The silent protagonist and the detailed environments really let you get into the story and suspend your disbelief. This game is still graphically awesome today on the Xbox 360. It probably didn't need to be remade, but I'm glad a whole new group of people will get to experience this game. It's not the scariest game of all time, but there are some spine-tingling moments. The gameplay is spectacular, the story is engrossing, the environments are creepy, and the characters are viscerally real. It's just a work of art, and it's my number 1. So that's my top 10 games on the Xbox 360. Feel free to comment on any games I left off, either purposely or because I'm simply unaware of their greatness. At some point I'll hopefully put up a list of 10 great Wii and Wii U games, not including mainline Mario and Zelda. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.